What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one we're going to be talking about what's going on with the overall market, what you should be watching for moving forward. I'm going to break down SPY, Tesla, the QQQ, Nvda, and a couple of tickers out there. I'm going to talk about what's happening with the charts right now and what the technicals are telling us, and what pieces of news are coming out for tomorrow that will affect the markets. I'm going to try to keep this video kind of brief, by the way, too, so I apologize if it seems like I'm going to go a little fast, but I just want to make it quicker. And before I say anything, let me just mention that I am not a financial planner. Take none of this as financial advice. And don't forget about the Moomoo link down below and in the description. Put in $100 and you're guaranteed up to 5 free stocks plus $100 back in a cash reward. Now, anyways, let's talk about the market. What is going on? So in the morning, I told you guys to watch the levels on SPY and the QQQ. SPY continued to hold the levels, but it still looked weaker than before looking at the MACD. However, there isn't true confirmation of it tanking just yet. It has some relative strength compared to the QQQ, but I warned you guys that there's a high probability that eventually it's going to happen. Now, I did not say it's going to just crash immediately. I did not say it's going to happen like, as soon as today or even like tomorrow. That's not what I said. What I told you guys for SPY specifically, it's likely going to see the move to the downside a little bit later. It could happen as soon as tomorrow, but if it doesn't happen tomorrow, they could hold it up a little longer, and then eventually the move will likely come either Friday or even early next week. It's very likely it's going to happen eventually, though, and that's the reason why I warned you guys to be careful with those 0 day to expiration options. I personally just like to scalp them and give them some time. It's very important sometimes to strategize when looking at which options you're choosing. And I just wanted to note that. Not financial advice, by the way. But I also warned you guys that the QQQ was looking a lot weaker than SPY, looking at the 4-hour time frame. And I warned you guys in my previous videos about these confirmation levels. I will discuss them in just a couple of minutes. And you could see what I predicted, what I told you guys, played out almost exactly what I had told you ended up coming true. So I'm going to break that down in just a few minutes. Let's first talk about something else. We have earnings that have been coming out. GameStop did not do the best. They missed on revenue but beat on EPS, and they announced a new CEO. Ryan Cohen is going to be replacing Furlong, and because of that, GME is selling off pretty hard, which is going to have a big effect on many of the other stocks in the category, such as like AMC. Going forward, we have DocuSign reporting earnings tomorrow. Then for Friday, we have NEO, and I'm going to be watching this one carefully. NEO, in my opinion, is going to make a big move. I'm very ready for it. It's getting very tight right now, too. For the economic data tomorrow, in the morning, we have initial jobless claims. We have wholesale inventory, so expect some volatility at about 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. And besides that, there's not much else data coming out. And we don't have too many Fed speakers. The Fed is in silent mode for just a while until FOMC. So please be ready for that. And don't forget, we have CPI and FOMC all coming out tomorrow. Not tomorrow, next week. Sorry, guys. Next week it's all coming out. Not trying to scare anyone. Going forward, the market sold off a bit because of the Bank of Canada raising their rates to 4.75% in total, the highest in 22 years. This was not expected by a lot of analysts out there, and this is putting some pressure on the US Federal Reserve to kind of react to this. Maybe the Fed may pause or even mimic this. That's going to depend heavily on the June CPI, in my opinion. But now let's break down these charts because we have some time until then. Now, GME is down almost 20%, making a big drop after earnings. Didn't really report that great of an earnings. For SPY, here's what I'm seeing on SPY. I told you guys SPY could sell off soon, but it's going to be, it has to break 426. Got to break and hold below that. Came very close today. It could have happened, but it failed to break it. It managed to hold for the time being, but it's still looking weaker. If you look at the MACD, it's looking very weak right now, and the odds do favor that the bears have a lot of control. However, we need confirmation first, and I think the odds favor it eventually breaking that level over the next couple of trading days. It could happen tomorrow. If it doesn't happen tomorrow, it may not happen till either Friday or early next week. But the odds favor it making its way down to these lower levels, and I still stand by that. We're going to be watching for confirmation, but I still think it's very likely. Now, SPY is holding up a lot better than many tickers out there, but the QQQ is looking weak. It's tanking again in the after hours. Now, when I recorded the video, I told you guys there were 2 levels to watch for on the QQQ, which were very significant. If it managed to hold above 356, it could have turned bullish. If it ended up tanking to 353 and it broke below that, I told you guys it's going to come, crashing down to 350. It's going to make a big move to the downside. I warned you about this in the pre-market. It was chopping back and forth between support and resistance for many, many days. And as a result, we got the bearish confirmation, a clean break below 353. And what happened? It came all the way down to 350. So when it was around 350, I warned you guys the signals were still looking kind of bearish on it, even more bearish than many other tickers out there. And I expected this thing to start continuing to drop and look weaker than SPY. So I was warning you guys about this. And look at what happened. It continued to drop. It's now testing the 50. I told you guys to watch the 50 EMA in the 348s, and that is where this thing closed at, very, very close. And now it's very close to it. If it breaks below this, it's going to come all the way down to 346.5 or around that zone. So watch it very carefully. Technicals are looking weak on it. I'm going to be expecting some reaction from the 50, though. It's going to try to bounce a little bit. But like I said before, the bigger trend is still looking weaker. We had this head and shoulders like formation that I told you guys about, and that is, once again, it got confirmation of the move. And that's going to likely bring this thing closer to where this like 346.5 area is. Now, here's the thing about the QQQ though. There's also a possibility that it could be forming like a larger head and shoulders right here. So what if this is the left shoulder? This is like the head here, and then the right shoulder forms. Maybe we get one more pop, and then we see more downside, or it just continues to drop. It's got to be one of those two. I'm going to be watching how it reacts to this 346.5 level, and if we do form like a right shoulder or not. If we don't do it, if we just fail to form any right shoulder, something could cause this thing to drop even harder to this imbalance. Because if it breaks below 346.5, there's not much support holding it, and it's going to come down to 340 pretty quickly. Maybe next week it could happen. I don't know for sure if that's going to happen. We have to wait for confirmation. But the bottom line is it's looking weak for now. I'm going to be expecting a small reaction, but overall, like I said, still looking weak, and the trend still favors the bears now. Looking at the current candle, looking at the MACD, looking at this bearish divergence, which I called out a couple of days ago, which is slowly but surely starting to play out. I'm going to be watching the 50 EMA. If that fails us, there could be 346.5 to be tested. All right, for SPY, we have some resistance around this 427 to 427.5 zone. Support is around 426 flats. There's also some support at 426.5, but 426 specifically is very strong support. There's no confirmation of it breaking down hard yet, but there's a high probability it's going to do that eventually over the next couple of trading days. Maybe as soon as tomorrow. If not tomorrow, it could happen by Friday or early next week. And we have to wait for confirmation, but there's a high probability it's going to eventually break this level. Now, it might get a reaction bounce and just continue to trade sideways for a while before we get the big drop, but I still believe the odds favor that, and I'm saying that based off this setup and based off the MACD right now. Just wanted to inform you guys about that. If you look at Netflix, got a pop after we got some bullish readings from JP Morgan and other banks saying that they're bullish on Netflix. Then it ended up just tanking with the market. And I warned you guys about these levels. Like I said, 400, this zone was going to be very important. If that fails us, now 395 could come, if not even lower than that. It's about 390 flat. For Tesla, what's going on with Tesla? Tesla got a nice push up, and I told you guys for Tesla to turn really bullish, it's got to hold 230, and it failed to do so, unfortunately. We got a wick there, but it didn't really hold it nicely. Now it's slowing down. We got a bearish cross on the PPO for the 4-hour, and it's looking a little bit weak. Not as super weak, though, just a little bit. And here's the thing about Tesla. We have this gap that's unfilled all the way down to about this 221 area. I think Tesla's going to fill that gap as soon as tomorrow or by Friday. It's going to have a little bit more downside, I think, and I think the QQQ may dictate it. So we might see Tesla come down a little bit more, fill this gap down to 221, then we might get a reaction off of it. Now, here's what you have to watch for. If Tesla comes down to fill this gap at 221, see if it could bounce or not. If it manages to bounce, it could begin to chop between 223, the zone right over there, to 221. If it doesn't bounce off 221, you're going to be watching 220, 218 to 217, then 214. I don't think it's going to drop all the way down there that fast unless we get a bad piece of news, but I am leaning in the direction of it coming down a little bit more before we get some more buyers to step in. So that's what I'm seeing for Tesla. Make sure you watch that level carefully. It's down another 90 cents in the after hours for now, but confirmation of the potential gap fill would be a break below 223. We're getting close, so watch that carefully. For Neo, it's a little bit green in the after hours. It's very flat. It's very tight overall. Very, very tight. If Neo wants to turn bullish, we got to break above $8 and hold it. If we fail to do so, it's going to remain very, very tight. Now, for now, what I'm thinking is either after earnings or right before earnings, we might see NEO pop. I'm leaning more in that direction, but I'm not going all in on NEO. I'm not like buying, way too many calls or anything like that. I'm not going crazy over NEO. I'm gonna hold. Excuse me, sorry guys. I'm gonna hold a small position. I'm also gonna hedge just to be safe, but I am leaning in the direction that NEO is gonna make a big move to the upside. Now, let me just note that it's gonna depend on earnings. It could pump well above $8 beforehand, or it could happen afterwards. Okay, we have these imbalances in these higher $8 levels, but before it gets the pump, it might just trade a little sideways because of the QQQ. But I think it's going to gain some relative strength, and it's going to make an attempt to try to push up even more. That's what I'm leaning towards on NEO. It has a nice inverse head and shoulders and a cup and handle like formation forming, and it has on the 1 hour, this unfilled gap all the way up here. So if NEO can manage to hold above 8.2, it's most likely going to try to fill this gap. It may pump either before earnings or after, so watch it very carefully, but always manage risks and do not go all in on just one stock. That's not financial advice, by the way. What else is funny is looking at, let's see, the VIX. There is a bullish divergence starting to form on the MACD and also on the RSI. That tells me that there's a good chance this thing is going to make an attempt to try to push, but we need confirmation of the balance first. It needs to hold above 14. If it manages to do so, watch 14.2 and even higher levels. If it gets a bounce and it starts breaking out of this falling wedge, the new one that's forming right here, I know I didn't draw it out, but it's still, there, that could turn bearish for the markets, even more bearish. SPY didn't really tank too hard and managed to hold 426. If it breaks below that, that's when that's going to trigger this bounce because of SPX. The TQQQ, it's even more bullish than the VIX because of how we've been seeing the QQQ performing, and there's a good chance it might make its way up to 23. I called that level up. It managed to go all the way up to 22.96, just 4 cents away from my target. Super close, very, very close. Now, there's a chance it might cool off a little bit as the QQQ makes a reaction, but as the QQQ hits the major level I talked about, that 346.5 area, we might see this thing make its way closer to above 23 and then just kind of hold there. There's this imbalance over here. There's also this gap above here. So there is still some upside potential, but we got to watch it from a level to level basis first. The dollar, it's still holding above 104. If it keeps pumping, that could turn bearish for the markets. Not seeing it doing that just yet, but there is technically, actually, there's not a confirmation of a bullish divergence. Technically, I'm not really seeing it. So the dollar is just kind of shopping and going back and forth, but I'm hoping that it tries to like hold around these levels for the bears. There's going to be more hope if it keeps pushing. Right now, it's just going back and forth, not really doing too much. For Aapl, well, let's talk about Coinbase. For Coinbase, we got this gap. It's trying to make its way up to fill this gap, but I'm going to be careful now because of what's happening with the QQQ. Now, if it manages to hold 54, I told you guys if it held 54, that would be a bullish signal. It failed to do so so far, but there's a possible bullish triangle forming. If it holds above 54, it's going to make a nice attempt to get closer to 57, in my opinion. If it fails, we're going to likely see some downside. It's going to likely reject, make its way back down to 50. For Aapl, Aapl broke below. It's barely at support at 177.5. If it breaks below this, it's going to come even lower, and that's going to become more bearish, and it could approach 175. If it manages to hold this and get a bounce, we're going to be watching 178 and finally 180. Right now, the technicals look more bearish on Aapl, whether you use the extended hours or not, so be very careful with it. It's still looking more bearish, so I'd be careful with it. Gotta watch that 200 EMA too at 177 on the 1 hour time frame with the 200. Be careful. There's not much going on. There's a possible bullish divergence trying to form, but there isn't confirmation of it just yet. And we'll have to wait and see how Aapl reacts. If it just remains sideways, it might not be the best. There's no confirmation of it bouncing yet. So I'm going to be patient with it and see how this thing does. Nvda, I told you guys, Nvda is likely going to drop. I said it. I told you if it breaks below from this rejection point, you're going to be watching that 381 level. If that breaks, and I told you there's an increased probability because of how the QQQ was tanking, I told you in the video earlier, we're going to likely see this thing come down to about 375 if 377 ended up failing. And that's what happened. Now it's at 373. So now I'm going to be watching 370 on Nvda. We got to see if we can hold this. We have some major support there. So I'm thinking it's going to retest 370 first before trying to bounce. I'm seeing that for the time being. Not seeing a whole lot going on with it. It may just remain very choppy. So I'm going to remain patient with it. As far as Google goes, it got that Nice touch of almost 130, came very close to my target, just under by about 45 cents, then rejected. As it came down, the levels I mentioned on Google were as listed before. If it broke below the 50, I told you guys to watch this 125 support. If that failed, I told you that Google would likely make its way to these much lower levels down here around this like 123.5 zone. And that is close to where it closed. It closed a little bit below that. So it came to the next level. The next major level for Google is going to be around 1 at 20.75. It may make its way there before getting a bounce, or it could try to bounce a little bit from here to retest the 200. But either way, it's still not looking the best. I'm going to be looking for a small reaction bounce. It could retest like 124 and then start to trade sideways and cool off. As the QQQ continues to drop, though, this will slow Google down. Amazon, I told you guys we had some nice news that came out in the morning, but I didn't tell you it's going to continue pumping or anything like that. I didn't really give you guys a prediction on this because I was just trying to get my video out as fast as possible. Amazon broke below the 50. And then one of the things I warned you about in an earlier video would be support at 120 if it ended up breaking down. I said that like in the video from yesterday. That's where it went to. And I told you for bullish on Amazon, it's going to make its way up closer to about 128. Came a little bit below that. Right? So I gave you guys the bullish and bearish cases yesterday. That's why I'm not just trying to say I was right. I simply just talked about both possibilities, and the bearish case played out. And now that's at the 200, there's going to be an attempt for it to try to bounce here. It could make its way up to about 122.39, if not a little higher. But if it fails, if it breaks below the 200, could come down to this 119 level. There's an imbalance all the way down here to 115, so I'd be very careful with it. There's no sign of it bouncing just yet, but there is this bullish divergence starting to form. Might make an attempt to bounce into the low 120s, 123.45, for example, and then trade sideways. So be careful with it. For Meta, I told you guys to be careful with Meta. In my previous video, I told you there's a high probability of Meta slowing down. Looking at the MACD, but we needed confirmation if it broke below 269. After it broke 269, I warned you guys to watch for the mid 260s. And if that failed us, watch the 200 EMA. I said this in the earlier video. That is what happened to Meta. It went to the 200. And now it's just hovering there. It might try to bounce here since it drops so hard. It's very oversold. Might try to make its way up to 265 plus. But if it's very, very flimsy and doesn't really get a good reaction, it could still be more downside. We have this imbalance down here around the very low 250s. There's also this 258 level, which is where it bounced from before. So it all depends on if it could bounce up to 200. If it bounces, could retest 265. If it doesn't bounce, we're going to be watching 258 and then see if it could hold there. All right, but that's what I'm seeing for now. Meta is oversold though, so the odds favor trying to get a rebound, but I'm going to be careful because of how the QQQ is looking. All right, so anyways, guys, the QQQ is looking weaker than SPY, but for SPY, we need to wait for confirmation. It could take a little bit longer, but the odds greatly favor, seeing that the market is giving us many signals of weakness. The odds are starting to favor SPY eventually slowing down. But watch confirmation first, watch 426, and be very open-minded and careful. It may take a little bit longer. They may try to delay it just to mess with people who are holding options. And wait for confirmation and do what you have to do. All right, so thank you for listening. This video was a little bit quicker. Remain calm, cool, and collected, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Market to the moon as the long term is still incredibly bright despite the short term fluctuations. And don't forget about the merch I have. I have some shirts for you guys if you want to buy something like a tank top or a hoodie that says to the moon or eat, sleep, trade, repeat. It's all yours. It's your choice if you want to buy it or not. Thank you and peace out.